Ordinary people around the world have been failed by globalization, Justin Trudeau has told The Guardian, as he sought to explain a turbulent year marked by the election of Donald Trump, the Brexit vote and the rise of anti-establishment, nation-first parties around the world. What we're facing right now, in terms of the rise of populism and divisive and fearful narratives around the world, it's based around the fact that globalization doesn't seem to be working for the middle class, for ordinary people, the Canadian Prime Minister said in an interview at his oak-panelled office in the country's parliament. And this is something that we identified years ago and built an entire platform and agenda for governing on. Last year, at a time when Trump was being described as a long shot for president, and the threat of Brexit seemed a distant possibility, Trudeau, 44, swept to a majority government on an ambitious platform that included addressing growing inequality and creating real change for the country's middle class. If we can show you can have growth that works for everyone, that diffuses a lot of the uncertainty, the anger. Justin Trudeau 1 year on, what has emerged is a government that seems to go against the political tide around the world, open to trade, immigration and diversity, and led by a social media star whose views on feminism, Syrian refugees and LGBT rights have provoked delight among progressives. But as he enters his second year in power, Trudeau, a former high school teacher and snowboarding instructor, is under pressure to show the world that his government has found an alternative means of tackling the concerns of those who feel they've been left behind. He cited the signing of CETA, the free trade deal between the EU and Canada, and a hotly contested decision to approve 2 pipelines as examples of this approach. We were able to sign free trade agreement with Europe at a time when people tend to be closing off, he said. We're actually able to approve pipelines at a time when everyone wants protection of the environment. We're being able to show that we get people's fears and there are constructive ways of allaying them, and not just ways to lash out and give a big kick to the system. Canada has not remained immune to such pressures, he said, despite what the fresh wave of interest in migrating to the country in the wake of Trump's victory in the Brexit vote would suggest. I think there's a lot of people saying, oh well, Canada is a special place, and we are, said Trudeau. But we are subject to the same kinds of tensions and forces that so much of the world is facing right now. Trudeau said he is keenly aware that the world is watching. I think it's always been understood that Canada is not a country that's going to stand up and beat its chest on the world stage, but we can be very helpful in modeling solutions that work, he said. Quite frankly, if we can show, as we are working very hard to demonstrate, that you can have engaged global perspectives and growth that works for everyone, then that diffuses a lot of the uncertainty, the anger, the populism that is surfacing in different pockets of the world. In January, Trudeau's government will face off against its greatest challenge to date, a Trump presidency. When it comes to U.S. relations, few countries have as much at stake as Canada. The last year saw nearly 3/4 of Canada's exports head to the U.S. while some 400,000 people a day cross the shared border. Justin Trudeau, we are subject to the same kinds of tensions and forces that so much of the world is facing right now. Photographed Praswati, Reuters. Trudeau's father, Pierre Elliott Trudeau, Canada's prime minister during the late 1960s, 70s and 80s, once likened living next to the U.S. to sleeping with an elephant. No matter how friendly and even-tempered is the beast, if I can call it that, one is affected by every twitch and grunt, he told the Washington Press Club in 1969. Nearly 5 decades on, his son is poised to weather what will probably be one of the toughest tests of this sentiment. The Prime Minister and the President-elect seem to have little in common. Trudeau is a self-described feminist who appointed his country's first gender-balanced cabinet, while Trump's campaign saw more than a dozen women come forward with allegations of sexual misconduct. Trudeau has sought to champion trade deals such as CETA, while Trump has threatened to rip up NAFTA and bury TPP. The contrast was captured last December after Trump and Trudeau catapulted into global headlines within days of each other over their response to the Syrian refugee crisis. Trump, who had called for a temporary ban on Muslims entering the U.S., suggested that families fleeing war could be ISIS infiltrators. Trudeau, in contrast, was at the Toronto airport to greet the first wave of the tens of thousands of Syrian refugees airlifted to Canada in the past year. Trudeau skirted past these differences, instead highlighting the links that bridge both administrations. On Syrian refugees, for example, Trudeau pointed to underlying concerns around security. Certainly in a world where terrorism is a daily reality in the news, it's easy for people to be afraid, he said. But the fact is that we laid out very clearly, and Canadians get that it's actually not a choice between either immigration or security, that of course they go together. Canadian PM Justin Trudeau greets Syrian refugees in Toronto. The two governments are also keen to create policies that address those who feel that globalization and trade have failed to benefit the middle class and those working to join it, said Trudeau. There are differences in the policies, the solutions for it, but I know that when we talk about making sure there are good jobs for the middle class, that is a place where we are going to be able to find agreement and alignment on. A silver lining for Trudeau may lie in Trump's pledge to resurrect plans for TransCanada's Keystone XL pipeline. When the Obama administration rejected the plan last year, Trudeau said in a statement he was disappointed in the decision. When Trudeau called Trump to congratulate him after the election, the two briefly spoke about Keystone, said Trudeau, adding that it remains to be seen how the U.S. will move forward with plans for the pipeline. When people finally realize it's a tremendous opportunity to lead on climate change, Canada will have a head start. Justin Trudeau. Any reluctance to move forward on climate change south of the border could be a boon for Canadian companies.